everybody. Hope you don't blow away. My goodness, I don't think I've ever done a good-natured hour in a storm. This building's a little drafty. I think the worst of it's over, though. Hope you all are safe. Let's see. Wow, I started a minute early. I don't know what to do. Usually it's a little after 8 by the time I get everything working, but I think we're up and running. I don't have tech support Bumpy with me tonight. He the trainer today, so he's kind of tired. And so if anything goes wrong, it's all on me this week. But our clock is just turning over to 8 p.m. and we got a lot to cover. So I think we'll go ahead and get started, at least with the intro part of the slideshow. And, we'll look at some pretty pictures. Every week I say this, someday we're gonna go and we're gonna talk about the history behind every one of these photos. But that's not gonna be tonight because we're gonna talk about snakes.
I didn't see your screen yet. Are you sharing your screen already?
I thought I was. Let's try it.
No, I didn't see it.
I'm glad you spoke up because, okay, let me click. There we go. All right. All right, let's try this again.
That worked.
All right, thanks for speaking up. Now, when I do this, do you guys hear the music or not?
Very faintly, but it's there.
Okay.
Very faint.
Very faintly. I could tweak the volume on that, or it's not that important. We'll just move on. And now we're talking about snakes. You know, nature, there's we as humans, we've got spring, summer, fall, winter. But in nature, there's a lot more seasons than that. They're all kind of loosely tied to what we recognize as the 4 seasons. But the things are happening all year round. And this year is the season to have snakes in your house. Snakes, as we know, they're cold-blooded. They're not well equipped to spend the winter in this climate anyway, out and about. So they head for spaces that they know that they'll be safe. Those are called hibernacula. And in recent years, there's been a movement away from using the term hibernation when talking about snakes and moving towards a different word called brumation, B-R-U-M-A-T-I-O-N. But the place that they do this in is still called a hibernacula. So we'll just leave that at that. And Kate Hensel, I don't know if you were able to join us tonight. Something tells me that you had something else you had to do, but this was your friend Linda Volan. This was a picture she had sent. Now, some people think of this and think, oh, the horror, a 4-foot snake in the garage. But people like me go, why can't this happen at my house? Full disclosure, this was not a snake that was seeking refuge in the winter. This was actually a snake that was spotted in the springtime. Now, did it spend the winter in the garage? It might have. In talking with Linda about this particular case, they did have firewood stored in the garage, and there was also a refrigerator in the garage. Firewood provides cover, refrigerators provide cover and a little bit of warmth, both of which would be attractive to snakes in the wintertime. In any case, when Linda found this snake, she sent me an email rather quickly, followed by a phone call. And shortly after that, there was more frantic messaging because it turns out there were 2 fox snakes in her garage, a male and a female. Again, living the dream. I have been chasing after snakes my whole life, and I have yet to have a snake show up uninvited. Now, a lot of people, when they find themselves in situations like this, they tend to want to know how to get rid of them. And tonight, if I didn't do it enough in last week's column, I'm going to do it again tonight. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but if you've got a snake in your house, leave it be, unless it's in danger. They're not looking to bite you. In fact, when they go into their hibernacula in the fall, they're pretty well fed. They spent the last few weeks packing in as much prey as possible. And they've also avoided their digestive tract, because if there's any undigested prey or partially digested prey in their system, that could rot, and it could turn kind of toxic. It could actually kill the snake over the wintertime, because they're going to be sitting at a cool temperature. Their organs aren't going to be moving that food along at all. So I guess it's a long way of saying that while they're there, they're not going to be pooping either, because they're empty. They also are not the sort of animals that chew. You know, sometimes you'll get a rodent in the house, and they can, even if a small mouse, you know, can cause a whole lot of damage. So if they're, you know, if they're in the crawl space, if they're in the garage, yeah, you might want to find out how they came in, and next spring you might want to get that taken care of so that other creatures don't decide to start moving in too. But really, in the house is really about the most pleasant of house guests you can hope for. Now, this is an example of a local hibernacula. This was a photo, I believe it was on our King County Certified Naturalist Facebook page, but I also received it as an email. This is an abandoned drain in a field west of St. Charles, kind of, I'm thinking Campton Township, Campton Hills area. And look at how many fox snakes had chosen to use this old drain as a place to spend the winter. Now, as long as they're protected from the elements, as long as there's not snow dropping down in there, and rain and ice, and as long as that temperature stays above freezing, the sweet spot for these guys is about refrigerator temperature. 38 degrees or so would be ideal. And this drain, being down in the ground the way it is, it's surrounded by soil. Our soil temperature, once you get down below the freeze line of our soil, our ground temperature is a pretty constant 50 or so degrees. So these snakes that are here in the middle of this drain, they're getting some cool air from the top. But they can kind of thermoregulate while they're in there and keep themselves at a cooler temperature. And then come springtime. Now, I don't know how they got in there, and I'm betting though that this drain has been used year after year, because there was a lid on it, and this many snakes don't just fall in by accident. I think they're driven there by experience in the past. I don't know exactly how snakes find their hibernacula year after year, hibernaculums, but this is a very popular spot. And I would imagine that this was in January, and I would imagine that they're heading there about this time to spend this winter there as well. So, hibernation, or in this case of snakes, as we're now saying, brumation, we like to think of it as a long winter's nap, but it actually is a time that can be kind of hard on a snake. Now, this is a snake at Aurora West Forest Preserve, which is off of Hankus Road in Aurora. This is, there's a garter snake hibernaculum there in that preserve. And this snake had recently emerged. And you can see they look a little worse for wear. Now, this is this particular hibernaculum, I believe, it wasn't in a house, it wasn't in a garage or a crawl space or a basement. This was a natural hibernaculum. When a tree dies and gets removed, the roots that are left behind can leave, they can start to rot away, and then that creates channels or pockets underneath the ground, and that appears to be what this particular hibernaculum is. It's a hole in the ground. Remember, snakes, you see a hole in the ground, you call it a snake hole, but there's really no way for that snake to dig that hole on its own, not in this area, not with our types of soil. So they look for naturally occurring holes, whether it's where a tree used to be and the roots have left cavities in the ground, or also rodent burrows. Abandoned rodent burrows are very popular hibernacula as well. So this garter is thinner, emerging in the springtime. You can see he's quite muddy as well. The scales, snakes by nature, they're quite dry, and they need to keep those scales dry. If moisture gets into the hibernaculum, they're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that, which is usually shedding fairly frequently, or pretty close to the time that they emerge from their brumation. But this snake, it's got a pretty long to-do list. It's got to get out. It's got to get something to eat pretty quick, because it's gone all winter without, and they do fatten up, but by springtime, it's time to eat again. They're also thinking mating. They've got hormones that are starting to surge. Brumation, coming out of brumation will often trigger mating response in these snakes. So it's got to find something to eat. It's got to find a mate. And then it's got to shed these old winter clothes and get some fresh skin on, so that it can stay healthy and be well across the spring, summer, and into the fall. Now, we all have our bucket lists, and on mine is a place called the Narcisse Snake Dens up in Manitoba, Canada. Kim, I don't know if you're with us this evening. Kim Haig and her husband had taken a trip up here. Let's see if I can get this to go forward. There we go. It's pretty far up. You know, we tend to think of snakes as needing warmth. Not to say that Canada doesn't warm up, but their warm season, their summer, isn't very long. This is where the Narcisse Snake Dens are located. They're temporarily closed because of COVID, but the snakes there, there's some natural crevices in the rocks that are there, the geology, and they attract thousands of garter snakes. And we have lots of different types of garter snakes in North America. These are actually a subspecies of the same garters that we have around here. Thamnophis sertalis is what we have in our area. Sertalis sertalis is the main one. But this is actually a red-sided garter. Here we can take a closer look at their scales. Now, when you identify garter snakes, here's the full name of that. Parietalis is the subspecies. The garter snakes that we have around here, they've got this main stripe down the back. That's what identifies garter. I think that puts a lot of people at ease, because I always hear people say, oh, it was just a garter snake. Non-venomous species that consumes live prey. They have stripes on their sides as well. And those stripes occur on the second and third rows of scales. So when you count scales, I think we did this a few weeks ago on the back of a snake. You count, here's the belly scales. And then when we start counting the dorsal scales, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You go on across, there's usually 16 or 17 rows of scales. But counting up from the sides, when you get to the second row and the third row, then you know you're looking at a sertalis. And when they've got red sprinkled in, you know you're looking at a red-sided garter. This is really, it's a phenomenon that I hope to one day witness. When the snakes are going into their hibernacula in the fall, you probably, if you're there in the fall, you might see a few going here and there, but it's the springtime when they emerge. They form these big clumps of males looking for females. There's these writhing mating balls that occur. Sounds really cool. And it's like I said, it's definitely on my list of things to do someday, hopefully sooner rather than later. But when I look at these pictures, I'm reminded of a house in Batavia. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of it, but I got a call. This was a few years back. It was in the springtime, and a woman had a little note of desperation in her voice. She said, I don't know who to call or where to turn to, but my house is infested with snakes. So, of course, I'm thinking, another one. How do these people get so lucky? Well, she had the added stress of being, she's trying to sell her house, and she was completely unaware that her porch was serving as a hibernaculum. And she hadn't noticed the snakes as they went in one by one in the fall. But in the springtime, this was, I believe it was April, when she called, this mass of snakes. Now, nothing like this. I mean, we're talking in Manitoba, we're talking about thousands of garter snakes. Her house had dozens, though. And they were in the bushes, and they were on the sidewalk, and she accidentally stepped on one when she was going out to meet the realtor. So she was really freaked out about it, and she was wondering, is she going to have to disclose this? I tried to put her at ease. I said, they're there for the moment, but they're probably going to be going away very soon, because the other thing, a hibernaculum is a place where snakes can congregate to spend the winter. And sometimes you'll get mixed species hibernacula, but they can't stay together like this all the time. Being predators, they've got to be able to spread out so they can find their food and not overtax one resource or another. So they come together because that resource of the hibernaculum is there for them to share, but then they need to disperse and spread out for the summertime. So she kind of bought that. I don't know what happened with the sale. I know that the house did sell. She said that they were soon going to be leaving the area. So it did eventually sell, but I don't know if the new owners were thumbs up or thumbs down about having a hibernaculum on their porch. So anyway, maybe you can one day be so lucky to have that. I know that's something that I always am hoping will happen at my house. I'll keep you posted on that. So for our next little topic, we're going to look at this word here, Leucism. And you might be wondering, well, what the heck is that? Well, Leucism is, it's a partial loss of pigmentation, or an absence of pigmentation. And it occurs in all sorts of animals. It can happen in people. It happens in a lot of our local bird species can display leucism. I know every year I hear about a few robins that have weird patches of white on them. Other birds too can have it, but robins seem to be the main species around here that display leucism. And it could also happen in mammals like squirrels. Right now, there's a leucistic squirrel over at Potawatomi Park. And I've heard about this now for a few months. The preschool teachers at Potawatomi told me about it in September. And then I heard from a woman on Thursday who got this somewhat blurry picture of it. Now, this is a partially leucistic squirrel. Only its tail is white. And that's pretty much all you can see here. Is the tail. The rest of the squirrel is kind of well hidden. I've been over at Potawatomi now a couple of times trying to find the squirrel and get its picture, and I haven't been successful yet. But if you have a chance, you might want to head over there and see if you can catch a glimpse of it. It is pretty cool. The woman said that it looks like it's waving a little white flag. I don't know how well that's going to bode for this squirrel this winter, because if there's one thing a squirrel doesn't want to do, it's wave a noticeable flag like that in front of, say, a red-tailed hawk. but it seems to be doing okay so far. It's been, like I said, I first heard about it in August and September, and now it's November. That whitetail might actually help a little bit this wintertime because it'll give it some camouflage. And you might be thinking, now, wait a minute, Leucism, leucistic, how does that relate to albinism? Well, with an albino, there is a complete lack of pigment, even to the point where the eyes are not pigmented at all. That's why, with little lab mice and lab rats, they're generally albinos and they've got pink eyes. This is an albino squirrel that we've had in the area now. It had survived up until the start of this summer. I haven't heard about it since, but I've been hearing about this for 2 years. The first time I heard about it was at Primrose Farm. Our coworker who lives on the farm noticed this white squirrel near the porch of the farmhouse at Primrose Farm. And he let me know about it. And I said, well, pictures or it didn't happen. And he couldn't get a picture. Well, then I have some friends that live just east of Primrose Farm, and they started talking about this squirrel. And again, they couldn't get a picture of it. And then a third party, another kind of friend of a friend that lives in that same area, was able to get this picture. And this is the squirrel as of the start of spring, or I want to say maybe late March of this year. And this would be, the squirrel would be going into its second or third year. So it's been a survivor. I don't know if that area is maybe lacking in predators. I wouldn't think so. I think it maybe just has it's acquired the skills that it needs to survive. And if it is still around, and if we have a snowy winter, that white is going to aid in its camouflage, and maybe it's going to hang in there even more. Now, several weeks ago, we talked about black squirrels. We seem to have a lot more black squirrels, melanistic squirrels. Melanistic means a lot of that dark pigment. Leucistic means an absence of that dark pigment. But in King County, we have quite a few black squirrels. We don't have very many white squirrels. This is the second one that I've heard of in all of King County. The first one was from a forest preserve. I don't remember if it was Pingree Grove. It was somewhere in the north part of the county, Hampshire, Pingree Grove, somewhere in that area. But the albino squirrels, they don't show up very often in this area. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh, they do downstate. There is the white squirrels of Olney, Illinois. There's some dispute as to how that population came to be, if they were brought there and let loose, but I know the town of Olney has traded on its white squirrel population for many years. But here in King County, it's hard to find a completely white squirrel like this, but if you act fast, and if you're lucky, you might be able to catch a glimpse of that partially white squirrel that's hanging out at Potawatomi these days. So, buckthorn. Any of you who have participated in work days in our natural areas have probably heard about this plant, and you might have been fighting it in your yard as well. Common buckthorn or European buckthorn is called Rhamnus cathartica, and it is quite a problem in some of our preserves. Now, the plant itself is actually very good at what it does, which is survive and reproduce. It has both male and female plants, and it's the female plants that produce these dark berries. And I was at my mom's the other day. I took her out for a walk around her neighborhood, and first I thought that the neighbor had some very sloppy workers put a new coat of sealer on their asphalt driveway. And then I looked again, and what I thought were asphalt splashes were actually splashes of buckthorn berries. It's a dark berry. It's got a dark juice, and it's very popular with birds, which we'll get to in a minute. But there was just a big mess of buckthorn splashes all over their sidewalk. Now this plant is a big invader in our local woodlands because of all of these seeds that it produces. It can take over the understory. It can basically smother all of our young oaks and hickories that are trying to regenerate. And this plant grabs all the sunlight. It grows a lot faster, and it shades the oaks, and they don't survive. It also, remember a couple months ago, we talked about, I'm gonna bungle up the word again, allelopathy, when we were talking about how black walnuts send out a chemical that discourages other plants from growing. Well, buckthorn has allelopathic qualities as well. And it also creates, it works well with earthworms, which are also imported from Europe. So it creates this whole culture that just perpetuates itself in the understory of our local woods. So a lot of our restoration efforts are geared towards getting rid of buckthorn. So if that wasn't enough reason to dislike this plant, I stumbled on another one. And maybe some of you were aware of this. I had not heard this. Buckthorn is where soybean aphids overwinter. So those of you that live out near ag fields, I don't know if you've ever noticed a rise in the number of multicolored Asian lady beetles. These are those invader ladybugs that they're the ones people always go, oh yeah, those are the ones that bite. They try to get into our houses, as these were come fall. Well, the reason we have multicolored Asian lady beetles here in the United States is because they were imported to feed on soybean aphids. That is one of their preferred foods. And what some areas are seeing is that when they've got a lot of buckthorn that's providing shelter for soybean aphids, they're also seeing large numbers of Asian lady beetles. And they've also found that if they cut their buckthorn down, aphids don't have any place to hide, so they go away, and the lady beetles are lacking their preferred food source, so they go away too. I just thought that was kind of a cool connection. It's one I hadn't heard of before. And so if you're looking for more reasons to cut down your buckthorn, keep this in mind. It might keep you from getting bit by one of these dastardly little Asian lady beetles, which, by the way, are displacing a lot of our native species of ladybugs.
I have a question, Ms. Pam.
Yes.
So are the aphids choosing the buckthorn because they keep their leaves longer in the winter, or is it because they're feeding on the buckthorn leaves?
That's a good question, Silvana, and I'm not sure I know the whole answer on that, because I know the buckthorn eventually loses its leaves. And I think maybe because the female, the aphids overwinter as eggs. So the aphid life cycle calls for a generation of winged females and winged males that will leave their host food plant, which is the soybean aphid, and they head over towards the buckthorn. That's where they mate, and the female lays her eggs. Now, whether she lays them on the eggs, lays the eggs on the leaves, and then the leaves fall and the eggs survive on the ground, or whether those eggs are on the branches, I don't know. But I know that egg people are very interested in how buckthorn thickets aid the survival of soybean aphids in their soybean fields too. So it's not, the aphids themselves, the adult insects do not survive the winter, but their eggs do on buckthorn. I'm just not sure of the part. Does that kind of answer your question?
Well, my question was mostly to see why they choose the buckthorn. Is it because it provides some sort of nutrients for the aphid, or is it just a shelter place that they found?
No, I think it's a shelter, and I think it might have something to do with how they co-evolved. There was probably a buckthorn-like plant where these aphids developed. And there's a relationship that that insect has with the buckthorn plant. We see this, there's other insects that have similar relationships, those fuzzy aphids that we see in the springtime around silver maples. They go between silver maples and another species that's escaping me at the moment. But a lot of times insects will have, insects that feed on plants like this, they'll have two different hosts for different types of the year. So I don't know what the main attractor is, but I do know that it's something that whenever you've got more buckthorn, you've got more soybean aphids that are able to survive because of it, because they're drawn to it. And then you've got more of the things that eat those aphids. So yeah, cut your buckthorn down is what that means. Now, I was doing some reading. I was trying to learn more about that particular relationship. And by the way, I wanted to mention, so this is buckthorn in November, when all of our other native plants are turning brown and losing their leaves. The green leaves, as you mentioned, Silvana, buckthorn leaves are still pretty green. They've got a much longer season. It's another reason why they're able to outcompete with our native plants. If it's, generally speaking, if it's green by the middle of November, if it's green at Thanksgiving, it probably isn't native to this area. There's a few exceptions to that, but this wall of green, just crying out for some loppers and some bow saws to get in there and whack it down. But so as I was reading up on this, I thought, well, maybe it would be good to mention a little bit more about buckthorn and why it spreads so rampantly. And I was all set to talk about how buckthorn berries have a chemical in them, and that chemical produces a violent gastrointestinal reaction. It produces diarrhea. And when a bird eats that berry, it's not in its system very long and it ejects it out. And if a bird is sitting on your fence or it's in your trees in your yard and it's been eating buckthorn berries, you're pretty much guaranteed of getting your own wall of buckthorn. Well, guess what? I found a website with a whole lot of research backing up the assertion that buckthorn does not cause diarrhea in birds. It does in mammals, but birds, especially the birds that are inclined to eat these berries, their digestive systems just kind of naturally pass berries through fairly quickly. And there is some nutrients in the buckthorn berry. I've read other websites that say it's just a filler that birds only eat when they have to, but there's some very convincing research on this website, and it's been out there for 9 years. But I put the link up if you want to check it out yourself, but I thought it might be easier for you to remember to Google birds, buckthorn, and diarrhea. Those words, are easier to remember. The two B's and the D. But what the research on this blog site shows is that birds process buckthorn berries the same way they process pretty much all the other berries that they feed on. Now, if they're eating unripe berries, that can cause a problem, but unripe berries aren't something most birds are attracted to anyway. And a fully ripened, a mature buckthorn berry is actually something that a fair number of birds eat and get good nutrition from. And they just expel them the way they do the seeds of other berries that they eat, whether they're native or not. So just kind of a cool thing I stumbled across, and I thought y'all might want to check it out. Myth busting, birds, buckthorn, and diarrhea. All right, last time I'm going to say that word for tonight. We're going to go along now with a little public service announcement from good-natured world headquarters. If you have a plant in your yard called stickseed, you got to get rid of it. Now, stickseed, it actually is a native plant. I know I've pulled some of this out of my yard. This is what it looks like. It gets these tiny little white flowers on it in the summertime. And then those tiny little white flowers turn into these seeds here. This is actually, from the plant's perspective, this is a marvelous adaptation because these seeds, true to their name, they're very sticky. And a plant, remember, why does a plant produce seeds? It's so that it can continue its genes, can pass along, it can create a new generation. And the farther those seeds travel, the better off that plant is going to be. These seeds being this sticky, you might be familiar with the plant from this perspective. Now, I will say this is not my hairy leg. This was a Wikipedia photograph. I've never thought to take pictures of stickseed when it's all over my clothes. If you've ever gotten fleece in the stickseed when you're wearing fleece, sometimes you just want to throw the whole jacket out because it's so hard to remove these seeds. Well, the reason why I'm down on stickseed this week is because of a post a friend put on a Facebook page called Illinois Birding Network, which I'm going to diverge for just a minute here and say if you're on Facebook, well, good for you. But if you're not on Illinois Birding Network, you should check it out. It's a neat group. It's a great way to find out what's happening in the bird world. It is throughout the state. It's not just specific to the Chicago area, but it's a great way to stay in touch with what's migrating. People downstate will see birds returning a little bit earlier in the spring, and they can kind of give a little forecast of numbers that we might be seeing in the coming weeks in springtime. There's a lot of people turn to this website this Facebook page for help. The Chicago Bird Collision Monitor, there's a lot of members of that group that are on this Facebook page. So if you find an injured bird, somebody from CBCM can respond pretty quickly to get you some help with that bird. Well, this is something that Laura Werner posted yesterday. Laura is a friend of Hickory Knolls. She's put her kids through the Hickory Knolls preschool. She's a pretty regular visitor to the natural area as well. Well, she said that she'd heard of this happening, but she hadn't seen it with her own eyes until yesterday. This is some stickseed that she had actually was pulling from her yard, and look at all the feathers that are stuck in this plant. Now, I don't know, I thought I saw a little bit of yellow on here. I was going to guess maybe this was a goldfinch. Goldfinches are very good at picking seeds from our native plants, but when you've got a plant like this, it can turn hazardous pretty quickly. Now, she's not sure what happened to this bird, but she's hopeful that it was able to disentangle itself and fly away. And she just kind of wanted to get the word out there that it's not just an internet rumor. It is a thing that can actually happen, and it happened in her yard in St. Charles. And it doesn't just happen with stickseed too. As long as you're pulling them out, you may as well see if you've got any burdock. Burdock produces those big like nickel, sometimes almost quarter-size big burrs that stick on your clothing, get in your hair, get in your dog's fur. That too can trap birds. Birds can get entangled in those burrs and they can't get out. I've actually seen pictures, I haven't seen it in real life, but I have seen pictures of bats too that have gotten stuck, not because they were trying to feed on the burrs, but they just happened to fly the wrong way and get stuck and get blown into these sticky burrs. Again, it's a great adaptation for the plant because the seeds travel far and wide. In fact, I'm going to say rumor has it because I can't cite a specific source, but supposedly the gentleman who created Velcro was inspired to create that hook and loop system by what he saw on the ends of the burrs these plants that have these sticky seeds. So they do have a purpose, but cutting them down so birds can't get tangled up, I think that's a great service that you could provide. So that's your public service announcement for this particular week. And we're going to follow that up with a big apology. I made a mistake a few weeks ago when we were talking about spiders. Went a little something like this. We were talking about, this was a pretty big year for our Argiope spiders. This is the black and yellow Argiope. Some people call it garden spiders, some people call them banana spiders. And I was showing you guys how they make a large, again, nickel or quarter sized egg sac, and then this is what emerges. Well, you know what? Wrong. These black and yellow spiderlings are not the offspring of the black and yellow Argiope. They're actually the spiderlings of this imported species here. Import is not quite the right word. Say cosmopolitan species. These the spider has traveled all over the world. It's the cross orb weaver. Just the little informal spider surveys I've done when I walk around the downtown areas along the river. Almost all the spiders we see on the bridges, by the lights of the stores in the downtown area are this cross orb weaver. It's very much at home in urban and suburban settings. And it produces offspring that are black and yellow. I don't know why. I should have known when I received this photo. I just immediately thought of the Argiope because of the coloring. But looking, I have another photo that shows this particular blob of spiderlings, and it was not in what I would consider to be Argiope habitat. It was in a garage. And the Argiope tends to build its web and leave its egg cases near the stems of tall plants and bushes and things like that. They don't often find themselves in a house. Whereas cross orb weaver, a lot of times they're spinning their webs by our porch lights. If they get stuck in a garage, they can sometimes make do. They would rather be outside, but finding a cross orb weaver egg sac in a garage makes so much more sense. So in looking at these two, you might be wondering, okay, well, if these are not Argiope spiderlings, what does a young Argiope look like? Well, I was wondering the same thing. So I went over to Bug Guide and I looked up and found this picture here. A young Argiope has the same basic body shape. It is able to spin the same kind of a web. Remember, Argiopes are noted for this zipper-like structure that goes down the middle of the web. It's called the stabilimentum, and it's, well, there's different scientists have put forth different ideas of why they think it's there, but I think it does help stabilize the web. This is a spider that wraps its prey before the prey is dead. So there's a lot of struggling that goes on. So to me, it would make sense to have that zipper there to stabilize the web. But anyway, a young Argiope spider is not black and yellow. It is brown. The reason I was looking into these is I'd gotten an email from a woman who had a couple of large Argiopes in her yard this summer. And she said, you know, I look for these every year. I have fond memories of looking for them as a child. But she said, why don't we ever see them when they're younger? And I thought too, yeah, when they're black and yellow, they're hard to miss. And then I found out, well, they're not black and yellow. Now, with the cross orb weavers, why don't we see more of them in that stage? I think they molt fairly quickly into a brown color as well. And why they're black and yellow when they first come out, I don't know that either. But it's a neat phenomenon from the spider world. And I just wanted to make sure I set you guys straight because I had misspoke a few weeks ago. So you see little black and yellow spiders. They are not the offspring of this big black and yellow spider. They're from our cross orb weavers, which is a species that was introduced here and is doing quite well here. It doesn't really seem to be displacing our other spiders. They all seem to be getting along just fine. Now, speaking of spiders, just a little heads up, I know spiders aren't everybody's favorite, but we are going to go back to spiders again next week. We're going to take a different approach. It's a new spider friend I have, an actual spider, and then a new friend that I have because of the spiders that we've been seeing. We're also going to take a look at this word, eruption, not eruption, but eruption, and birds that we're seeing that have come down from the north and why that particular phenomenon is happening. We got some reader emails and we got a whole lot more. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or observations of things you've seen this week?
Pam, this is Diane. I wanted to ask when you were talking about the burrs and the stick seed. I read an article this year before Halloween about that white cobweb stuff that people use to decorate.
Oh, yeah.
And I read that that's really dangerous.
Yes.
For birds and animals. Had you seen that? Or
I have seen that, Diane, and you know, that's I should probably have done a segment on that. That's how I've been amusing myself on my walks to work. I shouldn't say amusing myself. That's why it takes me an hour to walk to work some days, looking at people's cobwebs. It is a danger. That, you know, synthetic fibers, people sometimes will even put out, like they'll put out little pieces of yarn for birds, and a lot of yarns these days don't have, they aren't made of wool or cotton, they're made of synthetic fibers, and they don't go, hold on, I've got some examples here. Now this bird, in fact, Laura McKenzie, you gave me this nest. This bird did just fine, but look at, I mean, this is like fiber fill from, I don't know, a mattress or something that was used to make a nest. As far as I know, nothing bad happened to this bird, but this stuff is tough. It doesn't break. I mean, I'm pulling really hard, and it you know, this stuff can get wrapped around a bird's foot or get caught in a nail. It's the same with that. In fact, I don't know if that fake webbing is this kind of material, but it can be a entrapment hazard, absolutely. So yeah, I've been, as I walk to work in the morning, I'd say when I walk home at night, but it's too dark then. But I do look and see if there's any, and I thought about, you know, maybe talking to people about it to see if they realize they had it, because it is, the danger is real. It could happen.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before this year, and I know a lot of people use it. It's become really popular, and
Yeah.
I don't think that they're aware. I think what the article that I was reading talked about how a hummingbird had gotten caught in it and died, but I just thought more people should be aware of that.
Yes, they should. So I'll make a note of that, and we'll see how much more, you know, how we can spread that word a little bit more next year. So often it seems like, you know, if we could somehow just get word to the retailers who sell, whether it's fake spider webs or
Yeah, absolutely.
rodent poisons. I mean, there's so many things that we're putting out there because we're using it for our specific human reasons, and we don't realize the, you know, the horrible after effects that it causes.
Right.
Yeah, synthetic fibers, not so good for our animal friends. Good point. Anybody else?
Pam, it's Kay.
Oh, hey, Kay, you are here.
Hi. Sorry, I logged on a little bit late.
No, that's fine.
When you were talking about the fox snakes, that was in as well. And did you announce where it was? And was that like last January?
Oh, and that, well, yes, that was January, January 19th of 2020.
Oh, okay.
And I would imagine that, because I don't think anything was done to seal that drain off, I would imagine that they're going back there again. There was an article in the Chicago Tribune, this goes back several years, but up in Lake County, there was a house that was a hibernaculum and had been one for a long time. And they had snakes coming into their kitchen. They were having snakes showing up in the pot, the shelves. And I believe the Lake County Forest Preserve District has acquired that property. I don't think there's anyone living in fact, the house might be gone now, but I think they were going to do what they could to protect that area, because snakes are loyal. Snakes live a long time. Even a snake in the wild is going to, they can get past that juvenile stage and get some size to it. They're looking at 7 years, 10 years, sometimes 12 years or more. And they're usually loyal to an overwintering site, and they'll go back to it year after year. So that drain is probably, fox snakes are moving towards it if they're not in there already.
And I'm sorry, where was that drain?
I don't know the exact location, but it's in Campton Township.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure. There's another hibernaculum that is not too far from the Bartlett Nature Center, which is up on Stearns Road. And little Frankie, may he rest in peace, Frankie was a fox snake we had at Hickory Knolls from 2008 until he died earlier this year. So that was, we had him for 12 years. He was a mature snake when we got him from Bartlett. Bartlett got him Dan Mitchell, who is the manager at Bartlett Nature Center, came to work one day, and here's this box on the front step of the Nature Center, dirty box with a dirty snake inside, and it was a fox snake. His thought on that was that someone had taken the fox snake from near the hibernaculum, tried to keep it as a pet. It didn't work out, so then they brought it to the Nature Center and left it there. But it's the hibernaculum isn't in that building, but it's not too far away. And so
okay.
If you want to have a good chance of finding a fox snake, go for a walk up at, what are they calling that now? James Pate Phillips State Park.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
There's pockets of Batavia that people find fox snakes underneath their sandbox. I heard from a woman that was a little freaked out. She was picking up her kids' toys, and she picked up a bucket, and there was a little baby fox snake in the beach bucket. Again, I don't know why that can't happen to me. You know, I guess they need a sandbox.
There's a fair amount in unincorporated Elburn too.
That's where Linda had that occurrence, and I know they did move the snakes out of the garage, but they didn't move them too far away. That's another thing, relocating snakes. It's like relocating any wild animal. You take them out of what they're used to, and sometimes they don't fare so well. Now, where those particular snakes were moved from the garage, they just went to the back of the property, which the snake probably visits anyway, so I don't think that's any big deal. But if you transport a snake several miles away, it could have some difficulty. It's going to be away from familiar smells. It's also going to be away from that essential hibernaculum.
Right. Great, thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to share that about 2 years ago, I was hiking in Starved Rock State Park, and we did see that like clumps of snake in April.
Yeah.
It looked like a Medusa head.
That's awesome.
And it was just like that, and it was like clumping here. You walk a little bit more by the Illinois Canyon, I think it was.
Okay.
the clump in here and then another clump in there and another clump. And I just kind of back to like that. Way too many. But it was really neat to see. Not something I look forward to.
Silvana, do you know what kind of snakes they were? Were they water snakes by any chance?
They were water snakes. They were the black water snake, and they were all sizes and all like, you know, these big clumps.
Yeah, I had a friend, he didn't see that clumping that you described, but he took a picture of a log by the river over there. And there were just two water snakes just kind of chilling together, which is, that in itself is interesting because snakes aren't particularly social. They don't like to spend a whole lot of time together, but springtime is key for them because that's when they mate. Babies come along then a little bit later in the summertime. But this past spring, a woman spotted water snakes because a lot of times where water snakes, they don't overwinter in the water, but just by nature of living near water, a lot of times their hibernacula are damp, and it's imperative that they get out and dry those scales out so they don't get blisters. So they tend to drape themselves in the springtime on branches. And a woman was walking over at Norris Woods and noticed snakes draped in the branches. Freaked out. Took some pictures, sent them over here, wondering, you know, what the heck do we have going on in our parks and is it safe? When we ran those pictures as part of a good-natured column, I think it was the most widely read column of that week or that year. They had like 16,000 views or something, which for a little good-natured column, that was quite a few. But that fear factor really kicks in when you see snakes in places that you're not expecting them and they're behaving in ways that you don't often see. But springtime, that'll be coming soon to a natural area near you. Next, like you said, April or so. Awesome. Anybody else? If not, I hope that you'll join us again next week when we'll be talking about the birds and spiders and whatever else happens in terms of late-breaking nature news. Great to see everybody tonight, and be safe, stay well, stay warm. I guess if we're going to get some November weather. Great to see you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Good night, guys.
Thanks, Pam.
Good to see you, Susie.
Yeah, I'm still alive.
How you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Walking without a cane or anything now.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Man, can you ride in a car
now? Yeah, I could ride in a car. I can't drive a car yet.
Okay.
Next week.
Maybe we can do some nerd gatherings or something.
Right. Sounds like a good plan. Good night.
All right.
You did good as usual.
See you soon.
Good night.
Night. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Kate.
Bye.
There we go.